Attention, please. Eastern Airlines Flight 19, now ready for departure.
Welcome aboard the Walt Disney World Express monorail. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're entering the vacation kingdom of the world.
There's enough land here to hold all the ideas and plans we could possibly imagine. We call it Epcot. Will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow.
Welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast, taking you back to the vacation kingdom of the world, the way it was, and the way it is in your memories.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast, the official podcast of the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society. This is episode 63, titled Project 90, where we'll be taking you back to a look at RCA and the Walt Disney Company in the late 60s before the opening of Walt Disney World. I am your host, Todd McCartney, and sitting in with me on this now chilly evening, Mr. JT Kuzier coming in from Ohio. How you doing tonight, JT?
I am great. Got the snow tires on the car.
Oh, there we go.
We're in that mode and getting ready for Christmas around here.
That's
Winter break's coming up, getting exciting.
And today, our very special Lake Buena Vista Historical Society ornament arrived. So it's huge. Dino Gertie is going to be galloping her way, Galloping Gertie, I guess we could call her, across the United States, and a couple donors across the pond as well. So we'll be getting that out. People are really excited about it. And coming in from the warmer climate, Hal, you do have a long sleeve on, but must be balmy 71.
It's a breeze.
It is
hours.
Aloha. It is 56 as we speak right now outside.
Ooh.
So we've got a little bit of the winter chill here.
It's
in
definitely chilly for you.
Sunny Florida.
I can understand that. It's 27 here, so.
Okay, yeah, we win.
All right, and usually we introduce Brian P. Miles. At this point, he is taking this month off. He's got some holiday duties. He helps Santa out every year, deliver gifts on the sleigh. So I can hear those sleigh bells in the background as Brian's getting ready for Christmas. But he'll be back with us next month in the new year. But we do have a special guest sitting in with us from the Big Apple, as Mr. Ted Linhart. Welcome back to the show, Ted.
Thank you so much, Todd.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here. And Ted's one of our gold member donors, so to speak. And Ted's got owns DisneyDocs.net. And Ted, maybe give a refresher to everybody what Disney Docs is and what you've done with that site.
Yeah, so it's my collection of documents related to the history of the development of the Disney parks, going back to the 50s, also the 1939 and 1964 World's Fair. So the emphasis is on how Walt and others looked at the future and how technology could create cities and technology. And it's a very retro-futuristic focused site. That's what the documents are about.
And you pretty much just nailed Project 90 on the head right there, too.
Yes, this document that we're talking about tonight is a perfect embodiment of everything that I love to collect and share, and I know is something you guys like as well.
Yep.
Ted, I always wonder, where are all the documents? Do you have like a room? Like, you open it up?
It's a vault.
Yeah, tell us what the system is.
I have a bookshelf. It's not that exciting, with drawers and binders, and everything is in a drawer or binder. Some of the best documents are in more elaborate binders, leather with maybe an embossed title on it, and others are just $8 cardboard little drawers that you buy at Container Store.
I was hoping that you had something like the architects or the planner boards have. You go into a town hall and they got those big drawers and big wide drawers. Metal. They pull them out.
If perhaps I didn't live in Manhattan, that I would be able to have that.
Can I ask, God forbid, what happens if like the place goes up?
Oh, JT,
it's over.
I have insurance.
Okay.
But yes, if there's a fire, luckily our apartment does have sprinklers inside of it. It's a good apartment building. But yes, fire or water damage would be difficult, except the site does have a PDF of everything.
Yes,
so that's
digital.
The point of it. Yes, yeah.
All right, last question. Answer, if you want, with the one you want, what's your most prized document you have?
It is the one we're talking about tonight, and
Really?
That's not a joke.
I didn't know that. Asking that, by the way.
Yes. It is when Hal brought up that we talk about this, I was like, that's perfect because this is my favorite item.
So you'd give them all away just for this one?
Well, I'm not saying that.
JT's looking for donors for the next bake sale.
I'm excited. This is awesome.
Yeah. And Ted, we actually just sent some documents to Ted that I had sitting here, never scanned them, from the Future magazine. So I think he'll get those scanned and put up there. While it's not Disney documents, it was an interesting piece. Written, I think, in 79 and 80 or 81.
Yeah, I think 79 and 81, I think, are the two issues.
Yeah, so Future Magazine was taking a look at Epcot Center before it was open. So I'm sure I'll scan those and get them up there. But, all right.
Boy, that really is a Future magazine then.
Yeah. You can see the future. All right, so we've got a couple things to go over. Last month, Hal, we took a trip to Thunder in Paradise, and then when we released our interview with Parker Raby of Rabco Industries, and we got a lot of great response back. We even heard from somebody who is maritally related to Hulk Hogan through some level. We got a lot of nice response back. People were repeating it and retweeting it and saying, "Oh my gosh, I completely forgot about this stuff." And it was really great to hear from everybody. And JT, we got a little fan mail from it too, right?
Yeah, a couple things. Scott Jensen wrote in. He just sent us some pictures of Hulk Hogan's place. It's called Hogan's Beach Shop.
Oh, there we go.
And I don't have a location. I probably should have looked that up beforehand. I thought maybe Hal might know, but
I think that's in the Clearwater area.
It reminds me of
here.
like a Ron John surf shop. There's a Hulk Hogan dressed up sign twirler out in front. It's pretty cool. And then another listener, Stephen Myers, wrote us, and he basically said, he didn't give us the direct connection, but he says he's related to Terry Hulk Hogan one way or another. And he said they've talked about this many times, and he, based on the stories he's had with Terry, we got a lot of it right. And he even said years later, Terry bought a Scarab back in the day. He wanted the hyperspeed on it. So pretty cool. And according to him, he put 2 Viper V10s in it, which is really, really cool. So thanks for those messages on the last couple episodes. I did want to add, I do have a screen grab from our last discussion where Parker's his name, right?
Yes.
Parker was stating about how they had to chrome plate the engine exhaust pipes and all that. So I went through the episodes and I found a pretty good screen grab of what he was talking about.
Oh, cool.
So we'll put that on the show notes for the last episode here, since it's already posted.
And I never got to mention that I have one piece of Thunder in Paradise production paraphernalia in my collection. I was browsing through a Goodwill one day in Tampa, and I found a Thunder in Paradise crew polo shirt with the Thunder in Paradise logo embroidered on it.
Oh,
so
that's fantastic.
That is in my collection.
So if you've only listened to our main episodes and you're a Thunder in Paradise fan, take a listen to 62.5. The
all
Parker.
3 of you.
Yeah, 3 of you that are out there. And also Parker sent in some great photos of Thunder out of the water and in the water with his father behind the wheel, and it's really neat. And then how I am prepping, your video collection, as we talked about. We have all the Thunder episodes, but I am prepping a edit for about an hour of all the greatest cuts and hits and everything that was filmed at Walt Disney World. We can't do everything. We'd probably be there for 8 hours. But we're going to do a movie night with that coming up, probably in January, to get people psyched for the new year. So, and I know you're kind of working on the definitive Walt Disney World filming guide for those 3 people that want to go live all the locations. So.
Will there be a 3D version of it, like Horizon?
I have not figured out how to make the 3D version of Thunder in Paradise, but we did upscale one to HD, and it came out pretty nice. So, using our new fangled software. So if you're a Thunder in Paradise fan, you want more, it's coming to you. This was Brian's idea, and I think it's great because only words can only demonstrate and explain to you a little bit about what went on with the filming. And I think you need to see Hulk Hogan being thrown into a hydrolator as a jail cell. That needs to be seen to be believed.
That is very true.
So
I had my sister reach out, and she's been a listener since day one, big Disney fan, and she goes, I don't know, JT, this episode was a little bit of a stretch. I go, look, I get it, but you have to see the show. So now, I need to send her some episodes.
Yeah, you got to watch
say, look, this is what we're talking about, because it's seeing is believing.
Yep. It may not rank up there of our number one episode, but, I think we had to talk about it at some point.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
All right, so JT, what do we have in the listener mailbag?
Got a good potpourri this month. First off, this is from Norris. And Norris, I will tell you, I spent a little bit of time on this, and I am not done yet. Norris wrote in about the... basically, this is a vehicle, you would have seen it, the Grand Marshals of the parade at the Magic Kingdom ride around in this. It's kind of like an open-top, old-looking car from the 1900s. And now it's actually serving at Epcot to do a character, drive around. Since you can't meet the characters, it's there's a piece of plexiglass dividing the driver and Mickey and Minnie, but it's not about the car as much as the tires. And he reached out because obviously we're in the former rubber capital of the world here in Akron. These tires on this car have a tread pattern that is legit just 25 Mickey heads wrapped around the outside. And I don't know how well the Mickey head tread block would fare in like high speed rain driving, but for a cavalcade down Main Street, it's fine. So I dug into the tires a little bit, trying to find anything. I did find out that it says I zoomed in on a couple pictures, that is a Trelleborg tire brand.
Oh.
I did find it says it's an S5 on another photo. I haven't found the S5 yet, but my plan is to reach out to this company, see what they say, if they give us anything about this custom one-off. Now, there's only 5 tires, so it's something they could have bought a slick from them, and somebody could have actually done this by hand. I mean, it's not that crazy with like a pattern or a template or something, so it might not have been done at the factory, but they're real skinny tires too, like a 205 series. So it's unique to see. If you ever see it driving around, you probably know what I'm talking about. But Norris will dig into this a little bit more and see if we can find anything else out on this tire. I just almost want to find the original, what they're basing it on. So next up, this is from Tracy Brimhall. Tracy says, are there photos from back when Space Mountain was being built? Her dad, Larry, helped to build it. And if someone has a picture with him in it building it, that would be a cool surprise for a Christmas gift. Tracy, going to dig into it. If you go into our photo archive, you can search for Space Mountain. I don't know if we have any of construction with workers, but with it being, what are we at, 23 days by the time this is posted, maybe 15 days till Christmas. Maybe a listener will share something if they spot something, or if I find something in our archives, we'll send it your way.
Yeah, I did find a couple with some workers in it, and actually if she searches Space Mountain Construction, it will come up. And the one specifically I'm looking at, if people want to go, is Space Mountain Construction 4, and another one called Space Mountain Construction. So
here we go.
We have a lot of work to do on our archive. But yeah, if you put in Space Mountain Construction, you'll get them. So JT, we can send a couple of those links to her. And as always, if anybody wants to search, the archive is always growing as we better our keywords and searchability and everything.
I'll show you how we'll say how good or better the search has gotten. That's kind of what I use now when I do show notes. I go on there and it helps me find things instead of clicking through each individual section, which there's so many sections now. So
exactly. And we've had a lot of people send us things that they've found online, or even photos that they've had. But one that comes to mind is that somebody recently sent us an eBay item, a rare treehouse villa brochure. So some great photos on there that will get added to the archive.
I saw that. It's like octagon shaped.
Yes, it is. It is incredible. Is it I don't know how. It is an octagon. Yes, 8 sides.
All right.
You work in elementary school, so that's good that you.
I know it's a little advanced for me.
It is.
Tracy, great message. Thank you for that. We'll reply here to you with some items. Next up, we have Mark Lemke. Mark says, hi, guys. I love the 3-part Horizons episode you did a while ago. And he's referring to our podcast episode, which was a 3-part epic grand showcase of Horizons. He says it was particularly interesting to hear the origins of the phrase, if you can dream it, you can do it. He lives in Gates, New York, near Rochester, and there is a Walt Disney Elementary School a half mile from his house. Its signs often include that famous quote, misattributing it to Walt Disney. Well, I need to call that principal. Between my job and childcare responsibilities, I haven't had a chance to listen to every episode, so he apologizes if we've covered this. He's always been intrigued that each Feature World Pavilion back in the 80s and 90s had logos. Do we have any stories behind those logos? What are they World's Fair inspired? So, Hal, you're a logo guy, and I'm sure you know this answer off the top of your head, right?
Yes, and I know that we talked about this in a previous episode, but
I can't remember when.
yeah, it's been a long time. So I believe the primary designer of the Epcot logos was Norm Ayoun, who was also the designer of the famous flaming chicken on the Trans Am, the hood of the Trans Am. He worked for General Motors before switching over and working for Disney, and he did the Epcot logo. And I believe there was a semi-recent article on D23 talking about sort of the history of the main Epcot logo and the symbolism of it as kind of like a star and a flower. And I went through. He said he did, hundreds of different versions of these logos, all by hand. And I think they were really looking for, some kind of, visual identity for each of them. And they weren't going to promote, while they did promote the sponsor, like that wasn't the main thing. So, at a World's Fair, typically, it was the name of the attraction, but the sponsor was also probably quite large on the sign as well. So they were looking for a system, a design system, probably inspired by the Olympics and some of the other sort of large scale events that had happened. So, if you look at a Winter Olympics or Summer Olympics too, every time there's an Olympics, they redo those symbols for the different events, like in a completely different style, usually localized. So when they did the Winter Olympics in Norway, they looked like Norwegian petroglyphs that were there, and they keep kind of expanding on the style, so they do something special every time. So I think it was kind of in that spirit that they thought, oh, let's come up, at least in Future World, with kind of like this sort of a system with a circle and then something that pictorially represents the idea behind the pavilion. So Spaceship Earth was kind of this globe moving in space. World of Motion was kind of like a bullet with the air currents around it. Cool. Yeah, the land was a globe with,
and it was
with
international too, right? When we look at this, you think about how those symbols were international, that they didn't need words to show what it meant.
And that is actually a very good point, because especially initially, they were very focused on this being a place of international travel. Much like the World's Fairs, they expected a lot of people from overseas who didn't necessarily speak English. So you're right, Todd. You would look at that and immediately you could get the idea of what each one of those pavilions was about. So, so they all opened, there were logos for each of the pavilions when they opened, with the exception of Wonders of Life, which did not open up with a logo. And I actually wrote Imagineering and said, you guys didn't make a logo for this, like as a teenager. And eventually they did hire someone separate to do a logo for that. And so then it finally did get a logo and ended up on the Centaurium. But yeah. And each one of the countries has a pictogram with the name of the country as well. That's in a different system, but also part of a system. So like, you can still see it today, I think, unless they've replaced it. It used to be on the load console for Mexico. As you were walking up to ride the Rio de Tiempo ride, you could look on the load console and see the Mexico logo. Right. So I don't know if they've taken it off since they've changed it over to the Three Caballeros. I doubt it, because that doesn't seem like the kind of thing they would spend money to change unless they needed to change out the system. But those logos appeared on calendars and on some merchandise in the early days. So you can probably find, and in the Epcot opening preview book, which I know Ted has on his site, all of the logos are available there, and that is a great document to look through.
Very huge. They take up like half a page in that document, I think.
Very inspiring for a young designer such as myself.
Did Imagineering write back to you?
They did.
Do you have Do you have that?
I don't know if I do anymore, but I might.
Look behind him, Ted. Do you think he has it?
I think it's there
It's
somewhere.
somewhere.
in that pile.
Somewhere in along with all my reject slips from them.
Oh, those would be interesting too. Thank you, Hal. We appreciate your interest.
Yes.
Very cool. Well, that's thanks for that, Hal. Mark, hopefully that answered your question. All right, our last message of the month is from Dane. Dane says, hey guys, we originally brought a map home when we went to Disney World in 1977, but stupid me threw it out at some point. Well, don't worry, Dane. We all do that at the end of the trip, and who keeps the map? I mean, that's not unless you have a nice fresh copy. He recently bought a replacement on eBay and scanned it, and he actually sent it to us, which is super nice. Thank you. It's the one from... Obviously, he says it's post 1975 because it has Space Mountain, but it's the one that's got the multicolored tiles at the bottom of each land and lists the attractions. But it's definitely a good one. It's got Magic Kingdom at the bottom with all the characters around it. I dig this map. It's very cool, so I appreciate the scan and sharing it with us, Dane. So that's going to do it. I'm going to close up the mailbag for now. Could only haul in so much through the snow. Reach out to us, podcast at RetroWDW.com for all your questions, comments, concerns. You can also send us messages directly on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and also drop us a phone call with a voicemail. Todd, do you want to say the number?
978-71-RETRO.
And we'll get those messages, and possibly any way you reach out to us, you could end up on the show.
All right, well, it's time for this month's Audio Rewind, and Hal, as always, is picking our Audio Rewind mind bender, mind buster, whatever you want to call it. And Hal, what's interesting is that you did stump a lot of people. There were not many responses, and of those, I would say only about 10-12% actually got it right. A lot of people fell for it and went for Muppet Vision 3D.
I have to say I am shocked because this song plays over and over again, or at least it used to. I assume it still plays over and over again on Main Street.
That's right. Let's take a listen. All right, so Hal, why don't you let them know what that was?
That song is called Beautiful Beulah. I might, you know what? It was a Disney song. It was from Summer Magic. With
go.
Haley Mills and Burl Ives. So
Burl Ives, wow.
Tisk, all of you that did not get it. You should know better than that.
Well, how we do just ask them from where it was. We don't ask for title, publication, and musical tempo.
No, but they should know. They should know a Disney song. I mean,
there we go. But some people actually picked up the actual name of it as well. And we do have a winner this month. Congratulations to Carolina Nedal. So we will get you your RetroWDW pins and Lake Buena Vista pins as well. And actually, guys, we just got a new one in. I don't have them. They're in the closet right over there. But we got some Lake Buena Vista refrigerator magnets as well. Historical Society refrigerator magnets. So we'll drop one of those in there if you know the answer to this month's Audio Rewind. If you think you know the answer to this month's Audio Rewind, send your guesses to contest at RetroWDW.com. All entries should be received by January 11th, 2021. All correct entries will be entered into a random drawing to pick the winner. All right, well, it's time to get to our main topic this month, and as we mentioned at the top of the show, it is Project 90. So what is Project 90? Where can we go find information about it, and why, if Ted had to run from his apartment holding one document, this would be the one? He's got fire blankets ready for it. He's got all sorts of plastic bags to put it in case there's a water leak.
I keep it in asbestos.
Oh, it's perfect. Yeah, that's the way to do it. So we're going to go through a number of different things here, but for those uninitiated to Project 90, it references a 90-day effort. Started back in August of 1968, and that was part of Disney and RCA. And quick, JT, what does RCA stand for?
Oh, I don't know the dog's name. Right?
No, that's not the Radio Corporation of America. So RCA was known for their turntables and known for their different audio equipment and records and such, but they certainly were starting to get into technology in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s. And actually, I had an RCA TV for a long time. They were still, I shouldn't say they were making them. It was like the brand had been purchased probably so many times by that point. And I actually lived near one of their main RCA offices in Bridgewater, New Jersey, somewhere. There was a big RCA building that always had.
They were still plugging through the 90s. I mean, we had a couple shelf systems, with the 5-disc changers and that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
My dad worked for RCA in the 60s. He produced cast albums of records.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
So,
that's cool.
And he worked in 30 Rock, where I worked until the pandemic. Hopefully I'll go back. But so we both worked in 30 Rock, him for RCA, me for NBC, which is a forerunner, a progenitor of RCA, or spin-off, or I can't think of the right word, but you get it.
Yeah, part of. So
yes, formerly part of.
So why are we talking about this? Well, it was really a document that went over integrated information communication system for Walt Disney World. And, as Ted is going to take us through this was really an optimistic way of looking at how technology can help the hotel industry, touring Walt Disney World, checking in, checking out, using this thing called a magic band that would magically charge all your room. But who knows? So we're going to let Ted run with this. We're going to interject things and really kind of think about, I joke about the magic band, but we're going to hear a lot of things that came to fruition, and not just, magic bands or rotary, not crap. What's the thing we've been talking about where the people counter that you walk through
Turnstiles.
Turnstile, yeah. Never mind. I'm just cut that whole thing up. So there's a lot of things in the park I'm sure you're gonna recognize from this that have come out over time. So, Ted, I will turn it over to you. I've got the document open, and before I say one last thing here is that there's a nice note with Roy at the end that says Walt Disney World proposes to make a reality out of a community of the future, a community that will be as unique in the year 2000 as it is today. So I hope we got another 20 years out of what we get here. So let's find out.
So if you want to follow along, the document is on DisneyDocs.net. Just search RCA and you'll find it. So I found this item on eBay when I first started collecting. Somebody who's not sold anything since, unfortunately, put this on eBay to buy it now. That was very reasonable. And as soon as I saw the cover, and if everyone looks at the cover, it has Progress City on the cover. So immediately, which, that image to me typifies and embodies so much about what I love about RetroWDW and Epcot and Future World. So you can tell this is in the spirit of everything about what Walt, who was now dead for 2 years, thought about the future. And it's a fairly oversized document. It's very elaborately printed. It's about 70, 80 pages. And it's essentially a business plan, but it looks like a publication. And it says RCA Systems Development on the cover. This copy was owned, apparently, because his name is kind of half on a label that's half scratched out, but still determinable on the cover, of Jim Pisilla, I think is the way you pronounce it, Pisilla, who was a human resources executive at Disney for many years, and worked himself up to become SVP of Disney Human Resources by the 80s. He's actually in Disneyland on one of the Main Street signs. So he's a fairly big, but maybe not as well-known Disney legend who I guess owned this document. Maybe it was his copy that was given by RCA to Disney executives, and he was working in HR. And this document, this project is a lot about how Disney staff would interact with guests and how they would communicate with each other. So that's all lumped in under human resources.
And I think it's funny. Someone obviously thought so much of this document that they set their coffee cup down on it at some point.
Yes.
And there's a
Yes.
coffee cup's ring on it, which is horrible.
There is a stain on it. Yes. They were not thinking. I mean, I guess I'm lucky that it was preserved as much as it was 55 years later. But yes, it was clearly used and read through. But there is a stain.
I was
on
like,
it.
oh, come on, Jim.
And there's
That was in the
Yeah.
meeting. It was given to him, and 50 other people got it, and he's in there, and he just set his drink down in the middle of the meeting.
I believe that is that is what I imagine actually happening, exactly like that.
They're all lined up with everybody's name on them. Take yours.
And speaking of names too, I mean the Project 90 team from Disney and WED and Disneyland. I mean, look at the names in there. I mean, not only Jim Passi as you mentioned, but you've got Dick Nunes, Billy Sullivan's in there. The list just goes on and on of the people that we've talked about. And boy, Bob was a popular name then too. Bob Matheson, Dominguez, Johnny Cook, Switch, Taylor, Foster,
Cook.
Pierce.
Yes. Yeah, and it's interesting that they listed out everyone's names from both RCA and Disney. You do get a sense. Arthur Anderson was also brought in as a consultant. You do get a sense from reading this that RCA and Disney had a very tight relationship, and that this was done out of the spirit of creating something really special. So it comes with a letter it looks like a copy to Don Tatum from T.G. Patterson, who is an RCA executive. And it says that RCA is pleased to submit this proposal to serve as the principal contractor for the information communication requirements for Walt Disney World. And it's dated January 14th, 1969. The document itself has a date printed on the cover, which is very unusual for something this elaborate, so that you can really timestamp it. That says December 1968. So when you open up the document, by the way, T.G. Patterson is Thomas G. Patterson. He was the director of the project, and the program manager of the project was Richard Baker. So you get into the table of contents, and it's 71 pages long, so there's so much to look at. And it opens up with an acknowledgement that this project has been around for a little while. They go into the fact that they gave themselves 90 days to create what they call a modular integrated system, so that you can plug and play different pieces of what's needed over time, and that there is a lot of cooperation between both parties, and that there was a presentation to the Disney organization on November 19th, 1968. So that happened obviously before this document was circulated and before that letter was created. And then on the next page, you have a picture of Walt and Robert Sarnoff, who was the Walt Disney of RCA, created NBC. Pretty much one of the preeminent figures in media, I would say equivalent to Walt Disney in many ways, although his spirit probably doesn't live on nearly as much as Disney's does. But at the era, was a very big deal. And then they talk about the goals. So the goals of this for Walt Disney World, there's 4 of them. It's to enhance guest satisfaction. It's to maximize facilities utilization, to minimize cost of operations, and to provide safety commensurate with technology. That's what this communication system was designed to do. And they talk a lot about this throughout the presentation. And the presentation is not dry. The reason it's fun to talk about on this show like this, it's not a technical guide. It is a walkthrough of how this could be used practically. And we'll see how the Carousel of Progress, I would say, inspired the way this document is laid out. We'll get to that in a moment. But this is not a dry document. It's very visual. If you look at it on the site, it's filled with graphics, and it's really what attracted me and why it's my favorite document, because it's something that was made in the spirit of Disney, but really for a very specific business purpose. So they open up with the conclusions, of which there are 6, that Walt Disney World needs something like this to operate successfully, that an advanced communication system is vital to the goals, that this system will result in more efficiency and more economic operations, that the system won't just reduce costs, but contribute in a positive way to profits. It will serve as a prototype for Epcot's information communication system requirements, and that RCA can implement it in time. That's one of the things you have to remember. This is 1968, 69 really, and this is going to open in October 71, and they know that. So this if you have any setbacks here, you're going to be have a park that's going to open, and everything that communication revolves around is going to not work. So they have about 1 year and 3/4 to make this work with technology that to me seems like was maybe very novel at the time. So there's a clock ticking, and I think they need to get Disney to make a decision whether or not to do that.
What blows me away about this, it's that thing that we've talked about several times in the early days, how they really went above and beyond when it came to trying to come up with new systems. They weren't just happy like, oh, we need a telephone. And that, like, no, almost ridiculously, it seems, in 1968 decided we need to integrate telephones, computers, fires, like all of this stuff. It seems so advanced. Like there were so many things that Disney was doing with their partners that was so incredibly innovative and groundbreaking at the time. And this is yet just another example of that. It is mind-boggling.
It is very ambitious. And again, if you think about the timeline, it's less than 2 years out and they haven't even decided necessarily to do this yet. And imagine trying to do that today. How many things can go wrong nowadays. To try to do this in this era seems almost too good to be true. And I think ultimately, we're not sure how much of this actually happened. But it seems like a really big thing to tackle for a park that already was, trying to accomplish so much. Right. The recommendations from RCA, of course, are that Disney elect to do this project. They do say they want Disney to reach an early decision as to the degree to which this system will be implemented, because RCA needs to be ready to provide as much help as they can. They want to have a joint team to be able to final all the contracts, and that there is a office on site staffed by RCA and Disney to keep it running smoothly. And that's the recommendations page, which is on page 9 of the document.
Now, Ted, do we get into anything about what's in it for RCA?
The document, and I think smartly, doesn't.
Okay.
That's obviously a good tool of pitching a business. You want to tell the person you're buying it from why they need it. I think we know that if RCA, who is how taught me in our pre-interview, that RCA went out of the computer business. If RCA was really successful with this and stayed in the computer business, this would have been an entree to try to create other systems for many other corporations, other theme parks, anybody else. They would have shown themselves as the leader in communication systems. So that's what they got out of it. But they do not say that in this, because that doesn't tell Disney why Disney needs it.
I think they just wanted to have World Key all over the place.
So they actually named the system. So they call it WEDCOM.
I love that name.
And there's
it's so Epcot-y,
It is so, and that again, this is why I love this document so much, because they knew Disney. I mean, RCA, maybe Arthur Anderson helped them. They knew how to package a document that would speak to the Disney people. If Walt was alive, I have to imagine he would have loved this document, because it is so embodies we're 3 years off the World's Fair. So RCA was easily able to see what Disney was about in terms of presenting things. I mean, this was RCA presenting to Disney what Disney was presenting to the world 3 years ago. So they really knew how to talk. So they gave a name to it called WEDCOM, the Walter E. Disney Communication Oriented Monitoring and Management System.
That's a lot.
Right? It's a lot, but it's great. I mean, you get WED in there. WED Imagineering existed. You get COM in there. I mean, obviously they came up with WEDCOM and then backed into it, I would have to imagine.
But they're playing off of the
perfect.
word. I mean, Epcot, everything at Epcot became, I mean, that alone is an acronym. So it's like, if this is still in their vision at this point, Epcot isn't dead. Well, kind of is.
No.
But
well, it's on the cover. I mean, Progress City is essentially Epcot, so it's on the cover. So they and I almost wish there was something else WEDCOM that existed today. You have WEDWay, so I guess WEDWay People Mover, so it kind of works. And they call this a new dimension in information communication systems. So the first thing they do is they show how will the proposed system benefit a typical guest. That's the first selling point.
I love this part.
It's
brilliant.
Yeah. It is brilliant. It's because it's not just saying, here Disney, here's why you want it. It's why your guest wants it. And we know that Disney was so focused on the happiness of their guests. So to talk about what's most important to Disney, to sell something without even saying I'm selling this to you, is just really getting inside the Disney mind.
And I think it also shows that the guests didn't need to know that it was there to reap the benefits.
Exactly, and that they do talk a lot about that. In fact, the first sentence talks about that. So what they also did brilliantly is they used the carousel of progress model, I'm going to say, to talk about what a family, who they actually name the family, will experience. They talk about a mother and a father and 2 kids. And so the first page right before, or the page that talks about the guests, right before they get into it, it says, let's find out by following George Kellogg. So they pick a name.
Just thumb through the yellow pages there and find one.
Exactly.
That sounds good.
I imagine there must be George Kellogg, maybe even listening today. And let's find out by following George Kellogg and his family on their first visit to Disney World.
And the picture, by the way, on the next, it's this scribble scrabble, not finished animation, like storyboard.
It's a storyboard.
And the mother needs, boy, she's slouching in that chair. She needs to fix her posture.
I agree.
Yeah, all of these pictures are television commercial storyboards. They had to have been done by someone that did storyboards for television commercial, which totally makes sense as something that somebody at RCA would have access to that.
So the first picture is let's call it mother and father.
The Kellogg's.
Carousel Progress, the Kellogg's. They're sitting in a travel office, it looks like, and there's a man holding up brochures. Behind him is a picture of Walt Disney World with the castle, very crude. But they're sitting there, I guess, listening to him, it sounds like. And they talk about the first step in the process being the arrangements. I'm going to read part of this and summarize part of it. But it says that George Kellogg and his family from Wilmington, Delaware, are eagerly looking forward to their first visit to Walt Disney World. Having read the brochures on Walt Disney World, Mr. Kellogg is aware of its popularity, knows wants to make reservations. So at the travel agency where we see them, a direct call is placed to the Walt Disney World Reservation Center. And here's what Todd just said. Although George is unaware of it, this is his first contact with WEDCOM. At the reservation center, the computer here is all capitalized.
It is.
Because I guess that's kind of like computers were a big deal at this point.
Computer.
Now, it says the computer is interrogated, which is such an interesting verb. The computer is interrogated by the clerk for room availability at the Contemporary Hotel, which is we're already calling out the Contemporary, which was known, but this is still.
I guess you could say that's what people do today. I want my fast pass. I'm interrogating the computer over and over again.
Yes, but I've never thought about, outside of Isaac Asimov type stuff or the Borg, you're interrogating a computer.
I'm trying to think. We use all these other words now that are so much softer, like query.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So a few days later, George receives written confirmation that his family of 5, I guess there's 3 kids, not 2 kids, has confirmed reservations at the Contemporary. And then it says that WEDCOM silently updates its files. I love the fact that they say silently. not. I guess computers would think of noisy pieces of equipment, but WEDCOM silently updates its files to protect these confirmed reservations. These words are so interesting.
I've seen movies from the 1960s, and if there's one thing I know, computers go.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that they would do this silently, and when they print out things. So the silence,
the deep
Whopper. The Whopper from War Games. Yeah.
Or the other computer people really knew at this time was on Star Trek, which talked to you. So there's also that computer.
True.
At the same time, pertinent information concerning the visit of Jordan's family is fed into the guest information file, which will build a guest profile, which is what exists today. So that is our first thing that was predicted 1968.
And it only took 40 years.
And that kills me that they are thinking about CRM in 1968.
Yeah.
And this document gets into that to more degree than this. And it says that this profile will help Walt Disney World progressively increase its ability to serve the needs of the Kellogg family and the thousands of others who will be guests over the years. That's exactly what you just said, the CRM. And again, George is not aware of it, but his reservation is fed into the computer's attendance prediction model, which triggers a whole series of actions designed to make the visit a more memorable one. But we're getting ahead of our story. So now we have more benefits, and we have now pictures of someone arriving at the hotel, apparently, and you can see a computer hidden from the guest, but in the staff members, I guess, little cubicle where you drive up to the hotel is a computer, and then you see a maid using a television. She's touching a television screen.
What's she
so
doing
it's touch
there?
screen. I think she's entering her location and the work that she's done, because later the document talks about how this system needs to know where every maid is and every room that's been cleaned at every time. I think she's touching a screen on what this person drew as a set, as a computer screen, to tell the computer, I've cleaned this room.
And again, everybody's got serious posture problems.
Yeah, this maid's been
I
working
agree.
all day, Todd.
So now we're at the arrival. So it's months later, and George and the family are just arriving at Walt Disney World. And at the entrance center, an attendant welcomes George. That's the person we saw in the picture earlier. And he verifies the family reservations. And the reservation list that this person has been prepared by the computer. So George now has had his second contact with WEDCOM. Again, it doesn't say this, but he doesn't know it. So he's given direction to the contemporary, and in a few minutes the family's registered and comfortably situated in their room. Now, I think we know that's a bit of a fantasy. At Disney World, you are not comfortably seated in room minutes after arriving.
Well, if
They're
you
pretty good.
get your room number beamed to your app now, you just walk right in.
As long as your flight's
That's
delayed,
true.
you go right in.
So the desk clerk notifies the reservation center that the family has arrived, and the computer's files are immediately updated by a video data terminal. So they use this term VDT in this document. And actually, I think if we have time after the end of the document, I have a document from 1971 that's the actual hotel methods and procedures for Walt Disney World, what actually happened. And we have a lot of the procedures for when people arrive. And they do mention VDT in that document. So there is real use of video data terminals that happened in reality at Disney World. I don't think it was elaborate as this document hoped, but they're actually in use. So when the family enters the room, George's wife Julie, so now the woman has a name. It's not just Mrs. Kellogg. She's impressed with the room's neatness, but she doesn't know that the room status maid locator system, that's what it's called, room status maid locator system, that's what that maid was touching before, assured that the room would be clean and unoccupied at the time of their arrival. Young Debbie, who's 11, wastes no time discovering the color TV, which has more channels than
color television.
All caps. Yes, it has more channels than she's ever seen on a TV set. And she says, "Look, Dad, this channel tells us about what's happening at the park tonight. When can we go?" And then 9-year-old Curtis goes to the AM/FM radio, also in caps, which I think probably a little bit unnecessary. Radio wasn't too novel. And Debbie yells, "Turn that down." Now, I think it's a little disconcerting that the mother's already yelling at
We
the
haven't even gotten to the
daughter.
parks, kids.
I know, we haven't got the park yet.
She's been in the car
So-
all day.
Sounds pretty normal with our family.
Yeah, but the vision of Disney is not supposed to have any of this yelling going on.
That's true,
So
that's
I guess they're bringing a little real world into it. Curtis objects because he's found a special channel, which now sounds like Little Hal Bowers. It's playing the music from the Disney movie that we saw last
up
week.
the VCR.
That sounds like, yeah. But of course, the special TV and radio programming are only part of WEDCOM. But this isn't important to the kids, just the results. So again, a lot of talk about how this is designed to all work behind the scenes and that the guests will never really know they're interacting with this
So,
system.
Todd, when did they start the special television channels in the hotels? Do you know?
You know, I mean, I was there in '80 and it was running. So I want to say it was probably like around 76, 77, somewhere in
Okay.
there.
I can't remember if we heard that it was earlier than that, but I think I did hear that there was actually ways that you could check out of your hotel room on the TV even very early when they opened.
This part where she's flipping through the channels and she noticed there's a channel that shows surveillance cameras of the play yard.
Yes, we're getting to that.
What's I'm trying to, you know, this, I'm going back to the 60s. I feel like you could send your kids anywhere and you didn't care back then. Is this more for the parents to watch the kids play, or is this was Debbie hacking into a channel she wasn't supposed to see?
I think it was for the parents to keep an eye on the kids.
Yeah.
I think they actually get to that maybe in the next page. They address it a little bit. It is weird. It's the first thing I noticed that stood out to me as
Just
a little big brother-y.
Yeah,
like
Mother
the rest of it
agrees,
had
but she
felt-
also appreciates the serious purpose of this special channel.
Well, if
Yeah,
you remember, even in the RCA Home of Future Living, there was in the baby's room a camera trained on the crib so that the mother could like watch the child remotely in there. So I guess since RCA sold, television cameras, live camera feeds is something that they could tout as, part of their part of their offerings.
But here you can watch other people's kids, which is a little creepy.
That's Now, did anything like this exist ever in the world of Disney? Like a camera on the pool, or a camera on like a playground, and you could see it on the TV?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I don't believe that was the case for the rooms, because even, if I think back to even the early security systems, like they didn't have cameras in very many of the attractions on opening day, because this technology was very expensive at that time. Like a closed circuit television was, I don't know what the figure is, but I'm sure it was a lot.
Well, everything had like one or two wires coming from it. It was, had to go just to the TV. I mean, it was like, I don't know. It seems kind of crazy.
It would have been a very, very complicated system to pull off, I think, using 1960s technology. I don't think, Pirates got cameras probably first. The Haunted Mansion still doesn't have cameras, even though the one in Anaheim does. So there were very few of that kind of live circuit camera. RCA, Space Mountain had them because they needed to monitor the tracks, but that wasn't until 75. So there were quite a few in Space Mountain and on the Wedway, but no, that stuff cost a fortune. And as we know, probably another reason a lot of this stuff didn't happen is that Disney was on a budget.
The other thing I wanted to point out here too is that I'm working with a lot of with the company I'm with about guest. Well, in this case, it's guest satisfaction, but it's really client satisfaction, right? And we outline the same things: the arrival, which is the onboarding of a client. So this is no different than any large scale looking at what your clients are, what they want, what is in it for them. Rather than a client, the client is the guest. So it's really interesting that they took a perfect approach to driving this.
Did. Yeah, and they're not in this business. They're not in they don't touch their guests really one-on-one, RCA. They didn't at the time. They never have. They either had a broadcast network or they sold TVs through third parties, so they didn't really have experience dealing with customers one-on-one. So how are you asking a question?
Todd, do you remember? I had heard stories that they had a system right away that you could like check out of your hotel room on the TV back in the early 70s. Do you recall hearing that?
I do not.
Okay.
Yeah, I do not. We were in the treehouse in 80, and I know we had to physically go check out, but
okay.
But we had a bill to pay. Who knows? Maybe they found out that they had a bill to pay on the TV. I don't know what my parents did.
So after the kids use the TV, the document talks about how WEDCOM has been performing other tasks aimed at taking care of the family's needs. The fact about where they were staying was logged into the computer via the attendance prediction model we heard before. And because they're now checked in and the computer knows it, the inventory control system and computerized personnel scheduling system have helped Disney management make sure that adequate staff is on hand, that food supplies have been provided, and that the stores are well stocked with popular items of merchandise. Now, I want to believe today that when I check into a hotel, the computer is updating that and doing these things. I don't really believe that's happening. Maybe it is. It feels like it's happening one-on-one here, like it's very direct. It sounds too good to be true, but that is what they're proposing. And Debbie now finds that there's another special channel on TV, and it's a channel allotted to surveillance, in all caps, of the hotel's fence-in play yard. She calls out, "Look, Mom, that's the play yard we saw on the way in. If we go down there, we'll be on TV." Mother agrees, but she also appreciates the serious purpose of the special channel, which I guess is to monitor your kids, but you can monitor other people's kids.
Okay, we're getting into a level of creepiness now.
This is Big Brother, yes. First of all, I have a feeling these cameras are too grainy to actually recognize any particular child, but this is the first creepiness Big Brother that we found in the in the document. There's not a lot more of it, but this does stand out as something like, all right, I think RCA, you've taken one step too far. You don't need this. So now that's the hotel. So now we're moving on to the visit. There's a lot of stuff in the visit. I'm not going to cover everything, and I'm not going to read it all. I'm going to try to summarize a bit. But on the nature of surveillance cameras, when George and his family, who are among the first to arrive at the park, little George, so now it's our third kid, we have Debbie, Curtis, and little George, is quick to spot one of the TV surveillance cameras, and that's pointed at the parking area, so that the attendants can make sure that cars and property are safe. Now that sounds like a good use of video.
I thought you were saying it's pointed at the park again. Another camera pointed at the park.
These at least is at the parking lot, and that makes sense.
Now, JT, I will tell you, it is my understanding, and based on personal observation, there are cameras all over the parks, pointed especially at like places where like public can congest. So my feeling is there are a lot of like security safety style cameras all over the exterior of the parks in the common areas. So
I'm sure, well, especially post 9/11. I mean, that changed everything.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's just people watching it now. Like,
that makes sense. Yes. So now George is at the ticket counter, and he uses, I found interesting, as a preferred guest, he uses his Walt Disney World credit card to purchase tickets. Now, I don't know where he got this card, because he just got to the travel center like a few months ago and bought some tickets for this new opening park. I don't know when he got a Walt Disney World credit card, but in the world of WEDCOM, he has a Walt Disney World credit card. And the transaction will be shortly entered into WEDCOM's computer system, and George will be automatically billed. So they're now already bringing in finances into this as well, and a way of bringing people really indebted to using Disney stuff all the time.
This is fascinating, because I wonder when room charges actually started, because we know credit cards were kind of like a late invention. Like the Diners Club was very. This is why I wish Brian was here, because I know he knows all the credit cards. Like the Diners Club was like groundbreaking when that happened. I think can't remember if that was in the 50s or the 60s. So I don't know when credit cards started to become kind of prevalent.
I think early 60s.
Okay.
If you watch Fargo on FX this season, there's a whole episode that's about Diners Club coming into to use in like early 60s. I think it's about early 60s.
So this would have been very progressive at the time. Yeah.
Yes, and not and branded like this. They're saying, like Apple just introduced a credit card a year ago. This is Walt Disney now becoming a credit loaning company, which like I don't think was ever in scope. It isn't in scope today, because they don't say it's a branded credit card. They're essentially saying it's their credit card. So you were talking about turnstile counters before. So now the computer is knowing when the family is going through the turnstile counter, and that the computer is counting park attendants. And as they see park attendants either becoming faster or slower than predicted, the system is starting to use that information to tell other people, supervisors throughout the park, whether or not they need extra help or not.
That's what the Magic Band is doing behind the scenes.
Yes, so first thing that they do is go to Haunted Mansion, and inside the Haunted Mansion, there's a dark attraction television monitoring system, and it's silently adding another safety factor for George and his family, which they don't get into. But how you were saying Haunted Mansion does not have cameras?
It did not have cameras. The one in Orlando, the one in Disneyland, I understand does, but I don't know when they were installed. But in Orlando, there were never television cameras in there.
So the next thing is interesting. After Haunted Mansion, they go to Space Mountain. So now Space Mountain didn't open in 1975. It was an RCA-sponsored attraction, but did they know Space Mountain was going to come this early? I thought they
were. So Walt had some sketches that he worked with John Hench, potentially for it to be in Disneyland, originally called Space Venture, and then I think they drew it up. The early versions that we see in the Walt Disney World maps, where it's kind of like the giant circus tent looking things with the odd angles. Apparently they took that design and they just kind of plopped it down in the Walt Disney World version, because they had a design that I think to fit the actual infrastructure of Disneyland, but they had the design work done, so they picked it up and threw it into the early 1960s Orlando versions. But originally RCA wasn't going to sponsor Space Mountain, so it was an attraction that they wanted to have there. But there's a very sort of convoluted story of how RCA ended up sponsoring Space Mountain. So it's not Space Mountain as we think of it today. It's that version where the cars go on the outside of the attraction as well as on the inside of the attraction, which was even more Matterhorny than the Matterhorny version of, that sounded wrong, the Matterhorny version of Space Mountain that we have.
Matterhorny.
So this is probably coincidence.
I think so, yeah.
RC, yeah. So what's interesting here is the family arrives at Space Mountain and there's a long line. And the computer knows there's a long line. So they send over a live crew of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs to entertain the people in the line, because the computer knew that there's a lot of people waiting in line, and this way they can be entertained and not feel like they've been waiting in a long line. I don't think that happens today. I don't think cast members, or maybe I'm wrong, come and entertain people in line when they know there's a long line.
I don't think it's for entertainment purposes. I think it's also crowd draw. You know, if there's too many people over here, they can send a character over to that spot to, suck people in one direction. I mean, I wouldn't doubt it if they're using it. I mean, Jesus, we're RFID everywhere, right?
Yeah, I think they do try to schedule some of the smaller live entertainment groups, like bands and things, to work in that function. So, but that's probably not based on instantaneous feedback. I think it's based on we know as a trend over time. It's like, although who knows? I mean, they may be like, hey, send the saxophone quintet out onto Main Street because Main Street's really busy right now, and like if it's not busy on Main Street, maybe they dress them up and like put them in Frontierland and have them play different kinds of music. It's possible.
But if Pandora's a 4-hour wait, like they should be having live people there all the time.
Yes, I've never
model, which they don't.
I've never seen that, and I waited in a 4-hour line for that, and there was nothing going on.
I saw that big guy in the cage walk by.
Yeah.
So the document says that Space Mountain turns to be a fantastic experience because, but it might not. Sorry, not because. It might not have been, but the computer detected a quote-unquote faulty pump. I don't know if Space Mountain has pumps, that maybe they do, or this version of it, the previous evening, and the computer alerted the proper personnel, and they went and fixed it, and if that hadn't happened, the ride might not have worked, and there may not have been anyone in Space Mountain. And not only did they fix it, the computerized inventory control system helped to make sure that the spare parts were in stock so that they could fix it.
That's amazing.
So this computer is doing everything. So now everyone's going to go eat, and they see on a TV monitor somewhere in the park that there's a special pricing for a ride, for their steamboat ride. So they go to the steamboat. So now they have the computer and I guess at this point there was obviously not one ticket serves all. Is that what happened in 71? Did people, I don't remember, when park opened, did you buy tickets for each ride? Or was
you had ticket books with so many A's, so many B's, so many C's, so many D's. Yep.
So now George notices the Hall of Presidents as they're on their way to the steamboat ride, and they talk about how the WEDCOM will help make sure that the Hall of Presidents is working properly. So later in the day, everyone wants to go back to the hotel, and on their way they stop by the stores, and that the stores are now well stocked because WEBCOM has been predicting how many people will be in the park and what the sales will be over time, and that the prediction model makes sure everything is ordered accurately and that there's merchandise needs are met. And it says, as a matter of fact, computer assistance has helped the buyer to maintain a 97% in-stock batting average and a high turnover rate. So they're saying that merchandise sales will be through the roof because the system will keep on top of everything that's needed in the park. So they're really hitting all the different areas of how Disney can make money here. They're doing it subtly, and they're doing it through the experience of a guest. But it's clear that they're hitting on everything that makes money for them, making sure that each guest is spending as much as they can, and the only way they can spend that money is everything's working properly, and that's what this WEDCOM is supposed to be doing.
What's funny is this document should be posted in a summary, this page 23 on the internet, because everybody complains it's all about money now, and Disney's trying to milk every dollar out of us, and you could see, even in 1968, they're trying to do the same thing. I mean, it is a business.
It's a business.
Trying to make money.
Yep.
So the next section talks about how George and Julie and the family are now leaving the park. There's a little bit of a silly thing here where the family notes how everyone seems to know their job perfectly, and both parents had heard of Walt Disney World's high-quality personnel screening, testing, and advanced training program. And on A Wonderful World of Color, TV program that they had seen various scenes of Walt Disney World in advance of the opening. Is that true? Did the Walt Disney World TV show talk about how well trained everybody is?
I don't remember anything.
Other than the frou shows we've seen, like the opening videos.
I don't recall any episodes leading up to the opening like they did with Disneyland, where Walt would say like, "Oh, hey, we're working on this, and here's an update." I think they didn't have any shows about Walt Disney World until boom, Walt Disney World was open.
So this goes so far as to say that they saw on the show how closed-circuit television, in all caps, was used to train thousands of employees in a remarkably short time period. Now this feels like a bit of puffery, that RCA is a little bit of scrambling to fit every little bit of thing they think they need to sell this through.
Yeah.
Well, they also looked at how little time they had till opening. They're probably like, hey, they might like this one.
Right.
Yeah,
train these people
right.
Because that is a
fast.
question.
Yeah.
How are you going to train all of these people? The answer, Dick Nunis is going to yell at them.
From his water
Right.
feed.
So what they're saying is that they were going to do Zoom, is what they were doing.
Yeah, that's right. They are in a way
Well,
predicting that.
so I remember when I worked for a fast food restaurant in the 80s, our training system was essentially like a slide, one of these little machines with like a screen with a slide projector in it with the cassette tape that would advance this. I mean, that was kind of an affordable way to visually train people, prior to video cassettes and everything else. So, I mean, assumably, because they said it was closed circuit, it's like maybe they would have TVs set up on different places on the property so you could come into a room and get trained by a live trainer, but broadcast it rather than have everybody,
Or just at 9 a.m. we're playing the the ethics VHS or the reel to reel or whatever they had back then. Not VHS, but get ready.
So now the Kellogg's have left the park and they go back to the hotel room, and George yells. I don't know why it says yells. It says yells. I guess they think kids
He's
just yell.
excited.
It's not good. Mom, the light is blinking. And then on the communications console, in all caps, that's what's in the room, which I think is a telephone, a red light, it doesn't blink. It winks.
It's winking.
It's
That's a
winking.
slow, subtle blink. It's,
So they check with the desk, and they have two messages. First, grandmother, very carousel progress, has called and reported that all is well at home. And another message, and this is weird to me, the way this falls out, has been logged requesting that Kellogg's contact the quote, or not quote, caps, System Communication Center about a lost object.
Now we have a little drama on the vacation.
Yeah, so Julie realizes that she lost her purse.
Jeez.
I don't know how you realize you've lost your purse.
Because the System Communication Center notified them.
Yeah, but how does she? I guess did this lady not realize her purse was lost till she
They're
got
having
to the
so
room? I
much
guess that's
fun,
possible.
Ted.
That's true. Yes,
they're on
that's a
vacation.
good
Like,
point.
wait, what could we have possibly lost? My purse.
Now, the dialogue here is weird to me. So they have dialogue. It says, George, exclamation point. I'm sure I had it when we bought your lighter. Okay. So now everyone's still smoking because it's 1968. That would never be. That would never be. Can you imagine that being used in a document today? I had it when we bought your lighter. That would never happen.
Right?
George responds with a groan. Great. We were only at 5 places after that, but let me call the desk and see what I can do. Now, this makes no sense to me because the communication center has called them to tell them they've lost something. So why does George think he has to go find it? Because clearly someone's already found it.
George is being dad. He's being the man in the family in the 60s here. He's like, great, let me figure this out now for you, Julie.
So the desk clerk immediately contacts, I guess George calls the desk clerk. He contacts the Systems Communications Center, where a radio call, in caps, is made to the area supervisor of Main Street and the security office in that locale. Earlier, an observant clerk had set the purse aside at the postcard stand and had notified the security office, which in turn had notified the System Communications Center. There, a check made on hotel registration had developed into the call to the Kellogg's at the hotel. So all this is saying is some clerk found a purse, found Julie's name in it, and they called the hotel.
There's a lot that could go wrong with all this here.
I don't know why they had to spell it out like that.
Well, they're making it where George normally would be TO'd and annoyed because now they got to go backtrack, search everything. Well, the System Communication Center basically saved the day and it didn't ruin the vacation.
but they spelled it out in such a convoluted way. A messenger is dispatched to pick up the purse and take it to the Kellogg's room at the hotel. By the way, I don't know. Have either of you ever lost something? Does Disney do that? Do they find stuff?
No, we lost something. I had to call a number and they never.
Yeah, it's not like I lost something at like a restaurant, like a mug I wanted to get back, and then like, hey, I just want to call the restaurant. I'll bet you it's sitting in the back. Let me just call them. Now they direct you to like a lost and found central hub.
And did you have to go get it?
I didn't even after that. It just I lost interest. It was like $8, and I go, it's not even worth it.
I see a missed opportunity here. They really could have bought an Amex, and she had traveler's checks, and the thieves did not take the traveler's checks because
that was the 80s. This is too soon.
No, I think they're oh no, Brian's not here. He would tell us when traveler checks started. So.
Yeah, like I feel like that was like an 80s ad.
Well, it definitely was. Yeah.
Lost to the
my understanding is if you go to Lost and Found, you say like, hey, I lost this, and then they just pull out a box and start rifling through stuff. Just unless maybe your purse.
It's a t-shirt. Here's 1,000. Let's take a look.
Well, here's some sunglasses. Here's a box of sunglasses. Here's a box of lens caps. Here's a box of iPhones. Cord. Yeah. Maybe if you have your ID, like if you have your Walt Disney World credit card with your name on it in your purse, it's like then they probably know that it's you. But
yeah.
So JT, American Express traveler's check started in 1891.
Wow. Get out of here.
So look at that.
He transposed his numbers, not 1981. He meant 1891.
1891. Isn't that amazing? That's pretty amazing.
What was the point? They barely had they had cash.
You didn't want to carry silver and gold coins that weighed 400 tons with you.
You know how the cowboy, you get robbed by bandits.
Hey, Wells Fargo, right?
All I got in the stagecoach is traveler's checks.
Oh, damn it. We pulled up with this whole train and all they have are travelers.
We have the wrong stagecoach. Come on.
So we're on page 23 of the 70-page document, and
we need to move along.
The page ends saying, thus ends the first wonderful day of the Kellogg's family visit to Walt Disney World, a visit enhanced by WEDCOM, the 21st century information communication system of Walt Disney World. So the next 10, 20 pages, which we'll go through quickly, discuss now they get into the real benefits to Disney. They go through benefits for each of the different areas of what runs Walt Disney World. They go through the benefits for the operations of Disney World and how it enhances guest satisfaction and it minimizes cost of operations. And there's a long list of bullets on how it's going to do that. It's going to provide safety, security, air and water pollution control, as well as keeping things running smoothly. Then it goes into benefits for finance. And it talks about how the inventory control system and the guest statistics and the inquiry and response systems and keeping land resources and utilities going are all going to help the financial workings of Walt Disney World be better. There's benefits for marketing, again with guest satisfaction, computerized guest profiles and preferences, a large and ready manipulable database. The computer can accomplish analysis far beyond what one can do manually. Accurate computer predictions of available capacity can use to target group sales promotions and can optimize the most profitable type of group sales through computer simulation. So they're talking, what is obviously in use very much today. And then TV advertising, how all the TV sets on the park can be utilized to market, upsell people while in the park. They go into benefits for personnel and training through all the closed circuit television that we're talking about, and how people can be trained very easily. They said they have 4,000 plus people to train by opening day, and that the closed circuit television will be a big help in making sure that hits the timing.
This is I see this one thing here. It's interesting. It says they really want to push the live streaming of shows, parades, musicals, special groups, from the best vantage point, and they can videotape them. They can show them on the rooms. I think that's. I mean, we're in that age now. They would show the fireworks during COVID. The live stream and that and whatever else. But it's kind of interesting. They're pushing that this far back.
Yes, yeah, they're definitely very visionary. And that, of course, is their core business, is video and television, or one of their core businesses, so that they knew a lot about. They talk about benefits for entertainment, and that's what you said, TV, they call it monitoring of live shows, not streaming. It'd be fascinating if they use the word streaming. Videotape recordings, and that these could be reviewed by Disney executives, entertainment directors in California. So, all this footage could be passed back and forth. I don't exactly know how they'd get it, maybe by Federal Express, which I don't think existed yet. Benefits for engineering. So they'd have monitoring and control of all the equipment and see when things fail. They'd be able to test things very easily, monitor performance information, and provide statistical analysis from all the failure data so they can get ahead of anything breaking down. Benefits for construction. The construction program will have been underway for an extended period of time ahead of WEDCOM implementation, and provisions will be made for an orderly phase-over of California-based computer activities and transition from manual computers. So RCA saw this being implemented in Anaheim, I think, as well as Florida, which is, again, as you asked earlier, what's for the benefit of RCA. Imagine if they could do both parks and then whatever else came behind that. Benefits for maintenance. All sorts of bullets about how maintenance could be improved, no more downtime, quality of the rides, things don't break down, things are gotten ahead of so that guests aren't waiting and you have everything running very smoothly. And then they talk about that, and this is a whole page is dedicated to these words. WEDCOM will have an operational nerve center where human abilities are enhanced through electronics, the System Communication Center, which is something it mentioned earlier.
Cyborgs!
That's what I was thinking.
So they have very crude diagrams of what this building looks like, which is essentially a big old school computer console with one guy sitting at it, and then
like
a conference room. Yes, right. It does look actually a little bit like the Batcave computers. And then a conference room with people standing around looking at
It's
it.
backstage magic, really, when you think about it.
It is, yeah. And I would guess that maybe eventually they would showcase this to the guests.
Color-coded construction boards on a pull-out overhead track. So, imagine the college boards that pull down and go sideways. They've got different ones coming out on a ceiling track.
So they say that the Systems Communication Center will be the operational nerve center for the entire information communication system, where information vital operation management is received and transmitted. So they imagine all this being housed in, it looks to me like a very small building if you look at the scale of the people walking into it. I don't believe that, but that's what they imagine, this all being on-site and all being managed. So now they say that you've seen the many benefits of WEDCOM for guests and management. Now let's see how the System Communication Center fits into the total system. So this gets not very technical in general, but for this document, it gets quite technical with flow charts and there's on page 41 of this, it's a fascinating they have icons for all the different actual pieces of equipment, which some of them don't look very different from one another. There's just about a bunch of pictures of old school televisions and reel-to-reel computers. But then they talk about a program management office, which again has a bunch of flow charts to show how everything worked together and how the different personnel will be used, and they have names for different people that they need to hire, including a secretary. And they have a program management office functions, and they get into actually how it's all going to work. Then they have all the networking that's required, the television and wideband system.
This is so detailed at this point.
It is very detailed.
Beyond just the Kellogg family.
Yes, no. Now we're getting into, again, I imagine there's obviously far more detailed stuff that
they showed what it could look like for the guest, and now we're getting into let's get backstage, the nuts and bolts of it here.
Yes, and now they have to get into
show us how this works, Jim.
Right. And it's still done at, I'd say, a fairly high level, but compared to what we just saw, it is far more detailed. They actually get a little bit into the costs. So they say that the technical proposal contains a cost summary for telephone service for both public and privately owned systems. The identified costs are a one-time installation cost of $39,150 and a monthly operating cost of $80,250. And that a comparison of net annual income per phone for two different size groups of telephone companies, 4 companies with annual revenue of $500,000 a year and 4 companies with an annual revenue of $1 million a year were compared. So they did all these comparisons to figure out how much this is all going to cost.
I like this statement. However, in the Epcot era, it's just great. And then they also go into RCA is not in the telephone equipment business, and it would be in the best interest of Disney if the telephone equipment were procured or leased directly from the equipment suppliers.
So this is a whole page dedicated to the telephone system, so it's a little bit something they actually haven't covered yet, because they realize that that's a huge part of this, and that's right, that is not something they do, so you imagine AT&T or someone else would have to get involved. But this is the first time we've actually seen any figures for anything in this document.
And ultimately, Disney did build their own telephone system.
Yeah.
They started their own company, that Vista Telephone.
That's right, yeah.
Because in Orlando, I believe the Florida Telephone Company was the predominant telephone company in the Orlando area at the time, which I don't think anyone. They eventually became GTE, I believe, or got absorbed by GTE. But it was a completely separate, out of the Bell system company in the 1970s. Because I remember going to visiting my sister who lived in Orlando, and they had this weird Florida telephone company, and they had different kinds of headsets than we had in upstate New York and all kinds of stuff. So,
So we're on page 53, and now we're at the computer system, and it says that the Disney Computerized Management Information System called IMPART. So now we have something besides WETCOM. We have IMPART, IMPART, which is an integral element of WETCOM. It's administratively and financially oriented. In WETCOM, operational applications are added. WETCOM's computer operations include vital operating functions for the theme park, hotel, and residential communities. So now they talk about how IMPART and WETCOM will work together and the different phases of how these things will be implemented over pre-opening, post-opening, industrial park, which I know is something we've seen in certain documents, and then they get into Epcot. And this is the first time I think we've actually seen Epcot kind of used as part of the phases in this document. It says Epcot will provide a revolutionary opportunity for full exploitation of the computer's ability to help make life convenient, pleasant, safe, and relatively free from many of today's routine tasks which fall into the category of drudgery. So here, obviously, Epcot is still a city. Computer applications for Epcot are discussed in a later section of this management summary, which details the evolution of WETCOM. That's going to be the last thing we talk about, which is very interesting.
I think this is interesting. They say, we're talking about expand communications, and it's getting busier. It says to satisfy this requirement, it's planned to replace the 7035 processor with the 7045 processor. Just saying, that's what they had in mind in 71 there.
Yep. Yes. That is, I'd say, the most technical this thing gets. It gets very detailed in terms of operations management and process, but in terms of actual equipment, it doesn't get more detailed.
I could be out of line thinking this or saying this, but how long did RCA really think all of this hardware was going to actually last? Before it was outdated and Disney was going to have to wipe it all out and start fresh with something new.
I would imagine RCA would think to try to stay with it and upgrade it over time, would you?
Yeah, I think the thing that they probably didn't foresee was, what is the law of how quickly technology...
Yeah, that's
Moore's law, right?
Moore's law.
I don't think they
yeah,
could have predicted Moore's law and just how quickly things... But if you think about it, so they were running, I remember, the system that would have run this was the RCA System 70, which was compatible with, what did I figure out? The IBM, I can't remember, Model 50 or something?
Oh, something like that.
But those computers that were running Walt Disney World from the 1970s really kept working through most of the 80s. Epcot got a brand new, they got the latest stuff at Epcot, but the stuff that was working at Walt and the Magic Kingdom really continued to work there until about the early 90s, if I recall, because I got to take one of the innovations and action tour, and they had just decommissioned a lot of the original computer equipment and moved it over from the big giant discs to EEPROMs and more modern technology, and they were still running some of the shows off of the film loops and things. So it actually lasted 20 years or so, I think.
So this is an unrelated thing. If you ever heard of the car, the McLaren F1, they always say to work on it, you needed a laptop from the mid-90s, they pull it out, it looks like an old compact and that. Is there anything in Disney that's still using some old 80s or 70s computer? It's still hanging on, we're just going to leave it.
So all I can tell you is...
The ladies at WorldCom.
Yeah. So when I worked for a company called I2 Technologies in 1990, we were brought in by Arthur Anderson as a potential vendor for Walt Disney World to try to tie together their disparate computer systems, because their reservations computer was separate from their ticketing computer, was separate from their their airline stuff, because their airlines was all done through Sabre, which was like a dumb terminal. And the reason we got selected, as a potential vendor is we had some interconnecting stuff, some hardware that could take old mainframe computers and put them on Ethernet and get them talking to each other. So at least in the year 2000, there were legacy systems still running. And even in Y2K, I mean, one of the hottest jobs during that time period were people who could program in COBOL, because there were still old computers programmed in COBOL that were running legacy systems in companies all over the world. One of the things that really cracks me up about this particular document is all this stuff about attendance prediction and trying to tell the executives how many people they needed to work there. Part of the proposal that I put together and presented to Meg Crofton when she was a VP at Disney was that very thing, because besides tying these systems together, we were trying to tell them our company also sold prediction engines. So you would be able to tabulate, based on people could say oh, I'm going to visit on this date. And based on that, you could basically put together, a preset touring plan, and you could know how many people you needed to have working at different areas, depending on how many people you had booked for hotels and what rides they wanted to go on, which is basically that Genie system that they keep talking about that they're going to put out now.
I mean, or basic My Disney Experience.
Yeah.
You could pull that up.
So, because when we got engaged in it in 1999, 2000, they were using My Disney Experience. They wanted a CRM system that could piggyback on top of all this interconnectedness. And that was what they were really interested in. So they wanted to know this family's favorite character is Minnie Mouse. So if something goes wrong and we have an abundance of Minnie Mouse plushes, our make good could be a Minnie Mouse, because we would know out of the three things that we could use, it's that's something that they would really appreciate. And they just wanted to do, but this cracks me up, because all the stuff that they were being very innovative with in 2000, here's RCA pitching this in 1968, and literally it took another 20 years, between 15 and 20 years from even that 2000 date for this stuff to actually get implemented and start working. So this just blows my mind.
So the final thing that it says in this specific system about Epcot is that, and I lost a page. Insomuch as Epcot is 10 years or more away, which is correct, of course, not in the form that they thought it would be, and the rate of new development is increasing, it is likely that the programs actually implemented for Epcot may differ materially from what is anticipated today, which is what you guys were just talking about. It is essentially that future planning be periodically updated to assure that it properly recognizes new trends and new developments. So RCA was ready to think about the future when they were recommending WEDCOM. Then they go into a whole section automatic monitoring control systems and how it would be able to make sure that things don't break down a lot and stay running properly. The section about automatic testing of different systems and things about at Disney. They talk about the digital animation control system DAX and other modern complex electronic communication systems to be installed at Walt Disney World are so critical to the operation that extended shutdown could not be tolerated. Now, it was DAX. I don't know, is DAX an RCA system, or are they talking about a Disney system?
So
the DAX system, I mean, I've heard that many times, not just here, right?
Yeah, so that is Disney's system. I'm not sure what hardware it runs on, but yeah, that is Disney's digital animation control system. That is when they replaced. So that's used to run the show control. That was the first time, a lot of the audio animatronics in things at Disneyland ran on a variety of systems, everything from tape or film with audio tracks. In the Tiki Room, it was tape that would have different audio cues on it that would get transformed into electrical signals that would then make solenoids go on and off. In the Haunted Mansion, they used like disc cam systems, so it was almost like a record that turned, and there were grooves in it that would cause an arm to go up and down, and when that arm moved up and down, it would move the character in a certain way. There were some analog computer systems, but really the first, fully digital ones and zeros animation control system that was invented for Walt Disney World, and everything was run on that instead of the weird combination of things that they had done previously. So that was a big deal.
It sounds like they didn't have much to do with it. They just said the DACs and other modern complex electronic systems to be installed.
But it's smart that they at least reference something that they did great. So now on page 59, let's spend a little time talking about the hotel-motel room communications.
I love this page.
I know also Hal is something that he really likes here. So they talk about the guest services proposed for the 1971 opening. So first they talk about the mural TV, not in caps, but in quotes. And it is proposed that RCA's mural TV color receivers be installed in guest rooms. RCA Color Television has proven its reliability and excellent performance in millions of homes. More of Walt Disney World's future guests own RCA Color Television than any other brand, which is a bold thing to say. Daily, over 500,000 hotel guests view RCA television throughout the U.S. Mural TV color receivers incorporate the experience gained in the home field combined with experience in the institutional field. How you know something?
I did. I looked this up, and the Mural TV was a real that was like the brand of television that they sold to institutions like hospitals and hotels, and they were made like industrial strength, so they were a little bit more stronger and resilient than normal televisions. They had special dials that you wouldn't find in your home versions, and there are people that have if you go to YouTube and search for RCA Mural TVs, there are people that have restored some of them back to life again and fixed up the tubes and have them working.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and they look like completely boring. Like, they don't look high tech or futuristic. They look like a typical 1970s television.
But it was the stuff on the inside that counted, right? That it kept it going, and that you didn't have to replace it. I love the comment of the motorless remote control.
Oh, yeah.
What does that mean?
Okay, so when I was... Did you have one of those, Todd?
I didn't have one, but one of them I know of would actually, when you press the button, there was some mechanical...
You're saying the physical channel would turn on the TV?
Yes. No. Well, there was the motorized, and there was also somewhere you press the button on the remote, it would strike a tuning fork, and that tuning fork would have a receiver on the TV that would then motorize and turn the channel for you.
Yeah, I think the first TV that I got for my bedroom, which was probably 1984, 1985, was probably hand-me-down from my parents because they got a nicer one. It had a remote, and you would push like the channel up-down button. It still had the turning knob on it, but there was a motor behind that knob, so you would hit the channel turning thing, and the motor would turn behind the knob and turn the knob to go brrr, brrr. Like if you wanted to flip 5 channels, it would go brrr, 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 brrr,
I got all the way around. My parents in their bedroom got one, and it had 13 channels because that was 13 was about it for VHF, and 13 different tuners. So you open this little door, and you had this little tool on the door you'd put in there, and you'd tune it to whatever channel you want.
Oh, we had that. I never knew what that did as a kid.
Yeah,
like,
and then
you didn't want to screw it up.
A little piece of plastic that had a number on it, or ABC or NBC, whatever. You'd slide that into the door, and when you close the door, when that channel was on, the light came from behind
and
it.
And it lit up. Mine was a push button. You pushed each one on each.
Similar. So, fantastic.
That's crazy.
Oh. Kids out there, you just don't know what we had to do.
Yeah, you missed the good time. I remember the variation of these. So the sentence here is that the 1971 receiver will feature the latest in the art of solid-state modular plug-in circuitry, motorless remote control, automatic fine-tuning, and other features designed expressly to fulfill hotel-motel requirements. I'm not sure what hotel-motel requirements are that different than anybody's home. Then they had a multiple outlet system, which is what, in a way, there's today, to feed entertainment, information, and educational programs to each of the guest room receivers that has been engineered to provide sharp, clear pictures with high reliability. The number of available channels, 12 plus FM, fully optimize the utility of color television. Then they have AM, FM radio, which they call decorator-styled controlled panels built into the room furniture are proposed to further enhance guest satisfaction.
I picture this just built into a nightstand or something. Is that...
Yes. I remember going to hotels in the 70s, and I remember that was type of what happened.
That's pretty cool. Like, I think that's slick. Like, that's almost to me like the current, like you walk up and there's like the USB plugs built in, you know, not on the lamp, but it's like actually built into the furniture.
This is the version of that at the time. And now we're back to the room status maid locator.
I love this.
This system expedites the renting of guest rooms, which is an interesting term, by providing current status information on every room. Registration and housekeeping functions can see at a glance the condition of all rooms in the house, plus the location of the maids at any given point in time. Now, I don't know how they know where the maids are. I guess they're checking in on something, but that's a little scary.
It's in the next sentence.
Oh yes, maids insert a key plug into a maid jack in the communications console in the guest room to signal her location and completion of work. That's
so
right.
It's like you come in, you're the maid, you check in, you put your key in there, and that lights up a light, tells whoever you're outside, and everybody else you're inside, and that's it.
I bet the two of them have to turn the keys at the same time.
Yes, and if they don't, the world ends.
Yeah. Reduced personnel requirements, faster room turnover, and better guest services are the advantages being obtained daily by hotel and motel operators using the RCA signal systems described above. So I guess this is already being used. The embarrassment of taking a guest into an unmade-up room does not occur.
Because it's like going to have a green light outside or something. The maid turned her key to the left and is done.
RCA signal systems are now used in approximately 100,000 guest rooms in the United States, providing simplicity of operation, high reliability, and at-a-glance read at a reasonable cost. So I did not actually realize, I hadn't read this, I didn't remember that point, that RCA actually, I guess, was already somewhat in the hotel operations business before this, and I guess that's why they thought they could do it. So that's the end of the hotel and room communication system. Then there's a system about mobile communications, about how people who work at Disney World will have different radios, pagers, and portable radios and vehicle radios so that they could talk to each other. And RCA wasn't that. In fact, on my website, I do have a RCA walkie-talkie proposal, I think, that was given to Disneyland from 1960 or 61. So RCA has been... No, that's Motorola. Never mind. Motorola is doing that. Sorry, not RCA. So now on page 63, we have a very interesting graphic that shows the timeline of when all this is supposed to take place. So they show the end date of October 71, and they have a column for every month from December 1968 through October of 1971, and they have the different phases or the different milestones broken out into water, power, sanitation, and attractions. Here they have, as Hal noticed when he and I were talking, Holidayland is mentioned as one of the attractions.
So Holidayland, I believe, was going to be, it was situated between Tomorrowland and Fantasyland. It's in some of the very early documents from 1968 and 1969. And I think it was kind of like the corporate getaway section where maybe they would have picnic tables and places to have corporate events at the Magic Kingdom, much like that. I think there was also a Holidayland at Disneyland when it first opened, which eventually they put the circus thing there. So it never made it. Like I said, it appears on a bunch of early stuff, and I never quite figured out what it was until Ted and I were talking. I'm like, oh, it must be that thing. So that was included here as one of the lands.
The other neat thing I wanted to point out is how well RCA did this. They used the term program management earlier, PMO. They've got this timeline. Let's be honest, it's almost like a Gantt chart, project manager Gantt chart.
Yep.
I mean, you can see now they tweaked and tuned it to be to their audience, but you see what they're doing here. They're taking classic project management capabilities that they have and putting into a digestible format.
So each of these, nothing here has more, everything here has maybe 18 months to get done. They have Tomorrowland, Adventureland, Main Street, Frontierland, Fantasyland, Holidayland, Liberty Square, hotels, and Monorail. Monorail has almost the shortest amount of time. Obviously, it's not the construction of the
go
monorail.
Ask Tom Nabby if that was the case.
So, this chart looks to me crazily ambitious. I can't imagine again, how you can implement something like this that seems very new, but very, all the antique stuff that, all the antiquated ways this had to be done then to do this in that amount of time. But as you said, it's this graphical that says here, this is going to be done. They don't talk about what happens if it isn't done, by the way. They don't really address that. Then they have a statement from Roy Disney and a picture of him. And now they talk about the last section of the document, Walt Disney World in 1981. So we're 10 years later. We have a picture of Progress City again. And it says Epcot, the experimental prototype community tomorrow, and other elements of Walt Disney World, the jet airport, the industrial park, the enlarged entrance complex and monorail will grow out of the economic base established by the 1971 complex. Epcot and related elements will represent the culmination of Walt Disney's vision of how future urban life can be enriched through coupling technology with human ideas. In a larger sense, Epcot as reality will represent just the beginning of the dream. Walt Disney World in the decade following its opening will be the result of a coalition of productive forces set in motion by Walt Disney, RCAA, in its proposed role as a major participant for Walt Disney World's information communication system, has jointly defined with Disney a system, WEDCOM, that will facilitate continuous evolution of new and better ways of American life. Now the next page, WEDCOM in 1981, the Epcot era is envisioned as having broad functional components: education, health, safety, utilities, municipal government, monetary, transportation, recreation, in addition to the vastly enlarged operation.
You know what? That's what we've always been missing: the municipal government, monetary, and utility pavilion at Epcot.
To ensure that WEBCOM can be economically evolved to meet these requirements, three important principles will be observed: modular design concept, planning by the Program Management Office, which will formally address the requirements for planning, and the application of proven standard product line equipments will be made. Then they get into each of these sections: education, health, and there's more images now of different people sitting in front of some sort of television or computer system, studying or listening. They talk about education and health, safety, utilities, municipal government. WEDCOM's computer operations will provide automated county and municipal tax services. That's exciting.
TurboTax.
School administration records will be gathered, manipulated, and reported via WEDCOM's computer. The current status of legislative actions and bills will be automated and available on a real-time inquiry basis. This would replace Dominion. We wouldn't have had all these alleged voting fraud. We'd have WEDCOM making sure everything goes okay. And it says RCA has developed such a system for the legislature of the state of Florida. So they were already involved. And they got into monetary and recreation. They go into all these different areas about how WEDCOM...
This is super interesting because a lot of this is predicting the future. These few different areas. And it's insane to me, some of this stuff. The monetary, I like that purchase and transactions will be accomplished through automatic debiting of bank accounts, which I picture my Apple Watch when I pay at the gas station. Like, I don't have to, just comes right out. And then credit card operations will expand to include transportation and entertainment.
And it says right before that, online remote terminals at the point of purchase will handle the transactions. And
insane.
That's what we have today. Yes, and then they actually have a picture of one of those old school telephones where you would put the card in and it would dial automatically from that. But actually, it's a credit card dialing in to be approved.
They say you'll get live coverage of selected sporting events. I mean, come on. I know that wasn't that big then, but at the same time, that's like the norm now.
And it says in the Epcot era, Walt Disney World will have a complex transportation network, people movers, a monorail, 2 levels of automotive transportation, and a jet airport. Several elements of WEDCOM will support this greatly expanded network. They talk about other areas of safety and utilities, and then they end the document with a big image of RCA offering one place to get everything, one source for master systems, one source for servicing. It's a graphic with the number 1 in the middle and all these different things that RCA can do, saying how WEDCOM is basically going to provide all of it, so it's one-stop shopping for everything you need for now and for 10 years from now and theoretically for the future. And then it winds up kind of rehashing the proposal and talking about how RCA is the great partner for Disney, and that the last sentence of that section of the whole document says, RCA feels that no other company could approach Walt Disney Productions with as much justification in proposing to serve as the information communications contractor for Walt Disney World. If I read this document was sitting there, it would be hard for me to not believe that, because someone else would have to come along with such the detail. And again, I think maybe Motorola, like IBM, I guess.
Did anybody else
at the time
do something like this?
So it's a great question that I've been trying to figure out since I got this. I cannot find any record of anyone else competing for this.
They had to get like bids, like let's see what people got, or
I don't know if that's what I haven't found that. How do you have any information?
No, so my gut tells me that this process probably would have been started with companies that they already had tight relationships with. So I don't know when the RCA relationship started to happen, because I don't believe they had sponsored anything previously in the parks, but they were definitely cozying up to like very particular members of the corporate world to get this stuff done. US Steel, we found out later on, did that stuff, did the stuff with the, so I don't think I think they probably would have just gone to a few vendors, and I also highly suspect they would have looked to have these people also try to do some sponsorship deals with them to sponsor attractions and things. So that would have offset some of the costs involved. They probably would have traded out, saying like, oh, well, instead of us paying you this money, it's like, we'll have you sponsor an attraction instead. Because they did work RCA very hard to do an attraction based on this stuff. I don't know if we're ready to talk about that yet, but one of the early ideas was to actually have this control center be an attraction in Tomorrowland. And there was a press release that went out in the April 30th press event of 1969 where they proposed that. It's like this RCA control center would become an attraction in Tomorrowland that you could go and see. And as you kind of mentioned, Todd, this concept eventually became the Astuder Computer Review and Backstage Magic. And there's a John Hench sketch that was put out during that time. It looks remarkably like what Backstage Magic and Computer Astuder Review turned out to be.
Right, yeah. It really looks like it's amazing. They're just sitting here. They're taking this all in, whether they go with it or not. The Imagineers' ears and eyes are listening and watching.
Yeah. So they tried to do that, and it's as Ted alluded to, we found out RCA decided to get out of the computer business in, what was it?
71 they announced it. Late 71 they announced it, and then 72 they did it. So it would have been around when this was going into effect.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine what would happen if they did this. Would they not have gone out of business, or would they have gone out of business and just kept this running as it went
So
on?
the head of RCA decided they didn't want to be in the computer business anymore, which they had been in for at least 10 years. And they sold all the computer business off to Sperry, which is how Sperry became the partner of Disney and ended up being the sponsor of the Astuder Computer Review with Sperry Univac in 82 when Epcot Center opened. So there's a direct line there of how Sperry ended up being, continuing to be involved with them. But yeah, it was incredibly ambitious. They, instead of putting this out for public display, DAX just kind of ended up as this thing underground that no one could really see down in the utilidors. They did go after RCA to sponsor another thing, which ends up on early maps, called Computerama, because computers were still kind of mysterious. And there was this other thing that John Hench mentioned in one of his books, was a show called Alice in Computerland. So I guess once RCA decided we're not going to do the computer thing anymore, all of these ideas for very computer-oriented attractions for Tomorrowland just kind of evaporated. They tried, Marty Sklar says in his book, they tried to get them to sponsor a new version of Mission to Mars, where they went into the computer instead of going to Mars, and that got scrapped. The RCA wasn't interested, and then finally, when they set things up properly, I think they had some other stuff up on the wall or something, and the guy who was the head of RCA said, "Oh, what's that?" And they're like, "Oh, that's Space Mountain. You could sponsor Space Mountain." And they ended up sponsoring Space Mountain, and then made the pre-show very RCA technology heavy, and then making the post-show, the Home of Future Living, a veritable showcase to RCA's technologies of the early 1970s and their TVs, and how that might apply to future living. So some of these ideas kind of lived on in the Home of Future Living, but a lot of this stuff just kind of didn't happen. I guess the world wasn't ready yet.
So in the hotel's methods and procedures, I'll just summarize what I read when I reread it tonight. There's this document that talks about all the different procedures from April 1971. Basically, there seemed to be three different things that actually made all this happen. There was a combination of manual cards and people writing things down and using paper that was printed. There seemed to be some sort of lighted dashboard that was sitting in a room, like a big board that had each room of the hotel assigned to it, and people would somehow use that board to block out when someone was in the room or not in the room, that they've reserved it and how many days they were in it. It seemed both kind of a hybrid of electronics and manual, somehow indicating on the board that the room was occupied. And then there is references to video data terminals and how the computer system would essentially keep track of who was where. So it seemed like, not that any of this was implemented, but when the hotels actually were being opened and the planning was 6 months out now, April 71, it was a combination of manual, lighted boards, and some sort of video data terminals to make it work. But they don't reference WEDCOM at all in this, or RCA. It seems like it was maybe something that Disney built or got someone to help them build, but it seems more internal. Yeah. So that's it. That's Project 90. I don't know anything more that, I haven't seen any other documents out there that predate this or postdate this, and not sure how it all ended up not happening, assuming that that's the case.
It's quite an amazing story. And just to sit here and think about all the different things that, it could have been, or all the things that, as I mentioned, got Imagineers thoughts reeling and coming up with different ideas. It's really quite the document, and I can see why, Ted, this is one of your, or is your favorite in the whole thing. It really encompasses what we want as guests, what Walt Disney World wanted as a company, and what RCA wanted to get in there. And I guess in the end, we got some cameras at the end of Space Mountain looking at us, right? That's where those security cameras went. They just pointed at us. So that's really cool. So we don't know if there was any follow-on anything to this. We don't know anything about the meetings surrounding it or who chartered it or anything.
I have not been able to find anything about it. We've done some digging. Maybe some of your listeners know, or there's something out there I haven't stumbled on yet. But I even asked, when I went to D23, I asked one of the Imagineers who spoke about it. They didn't know what I was talking about. An Imagineer who seemed to know more about the past of the company, not just somebody current. But I don't know if Tom Nabby or any of your kind of the connections you have any awareness.
Yeah, we'll definitely ask around the next time.
I think it's interesting. I'm online here on. It says September 17th, 1971. That's when the board decided to close its computer systems.
Yes.
And
RCA did. Yeah.
What's the timing on that? Is it like they didn't get the bid, so they're out? Like, did Disney know they weren't going to stick long?
I've been wondering that too. Like, when did they know that? Because that's not that far from this. I mean, that's when, that's 2 weeks from the park opening. So, absolutely would love to know how that timing worked.
Like, if Disney was so tight with them, they'd probably, a couple of drinks after, hey, are you guys serious with all this stuff? And then, it's like, look, hey, I don't want to tell you, I didn't tell you this, but we're talking about pulling the whole computer division, so don't sign with us or whatever it was. It's just somebody had to know something, especially back then at that point.
I would agree that could be why it fell apart, is because they knew they were getting out of it, or it could be, as you said, because they didn't get it, they pulled out. And had they gotten this, maybe they wouldn't have, or passed it over to Sperry. Maybe Sperry could have picked it up.
Yep.
I mean,
but yeah, that timing is.
It certainly would have been a feather in their corporate cap had they been able to get this and implement it, and it would have been a showcase to the world.
Yeah, which is what I think was the most benefit for them, is that they would be able to say they run that, and that's an entree for anything they would have done, to say we run the communications system of Walt Disney World. I mean, that's a really impressive resume point. And RCA, RCA struggled after that, and as we know today, that name doesn't mean anything to anyone anymore.
No.
Ted, I appreciate you sliding in here in Brian's absence, and this was a great. I didn't know the detail that this was going to go into, and I really appreciate you bringing it and sharing the document with us. And please get a fireproof blanket for it or something to wrap this puppy up, waterproof. Put it in some bags. So
it's great.
Well, as we wrap this up, Howie, you added a couple new shirts, I think, last month to our TeePublic site, if I recall correctly, right?
I did. I don't even remember what they are, but
you did the WED transportation system.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's one of my favorites. So back in the 80s, Disney thought that they would get into the business of selling people movers and monorails. Twice they tried to do this, in the 70s and then the 80s. To municipalities, and they successfully did do it in was it the Dallas airport, or was it Houston? In the Houston airport. They did manage to sell one somewhere. One.
One.
And so this was the logo of the now defunct company that tried to sell people movers and monorails to other places. And so since no one's using it anymore, I thought we'd pull that one out and recreate it and let the folks have the inside joke to where
we go.
Don't we have on the store RCA as well? Don't we have the dog?
We do. We did.
Nipper.
We have the Nipper and the UFO from Space Mountain, from the entrance where you would walk into it.
Yep.
That's right. Because he's public domain, right?
Yeah.
By the way, I just published to the site the 1981 Disney Annual Report. And in that report, in the financial review, is in the consumer products and other category, is $10 million in revenue from the installation of the Wedway People Mover system at the Houston International Airport. There was a small profit on this project, which is accounted for on the completed contract method. So they did see in 81, I think they were expecting that would be the start of something, which it was not.
That's too bad too, because it wasn't that. I did get to ride that one time, and I think it's reached. I was looking it up one day, and it had reached end of life, and they were looking for contractors to come in and either refurbish it or replace it. I think they replaced it finally.
So it's gone.
I think it is gone now. Like the tracks are probably the same, but they have a different system on there now. People movers at airports are fun. I mean, that's one of the few places where you really get to use them. It's one of those things that just never really took. I had a project in Dallas, of all places, and there was a people mover system connected to the office building and some of the hotels around there that ran from time to time. And we had a people mover in Tampa that ran from the convention center out to Davis Island, where there was like a mall. But that, again, some of that stuff has fallen, like that got demolished, fell out of favor. No one was using it anymore. It's funny. It's like, it seemed like a really good solution through the 80s, and then it just kind of has disappeared and gone by the wayside.
Well, I always pretend the Orlando system that moves you from the airport to the terminal's people mover. I choose to believe that, even though I think it's not. But it makes me feel like I'm starting my resort experience.
First ride of the trip. That's what I look at.
Yeah, we have two of them in Tampa. We have one that goes, we have multiples. We have ones that go between the central terminal and the air sides, and then there's another one that goes from the central terminal to all the parking garages. And my kids love to ride that one just as much as they love to ride the monorails at Disney. They get a big kick out of just riding those things around. So they're great. I love that stuff.
So Hal, maybe we'll see something in there for Project 90. So
yeah, let's see what we can do.
Oh, that's a great idea.
All right. Well, again, thanks to Ted for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. And
thank you.
Yeah, great to have you. And thanks to all of our listeners out there. If you can, give us a review and a shout out on iTunes. We'll be back in January 2021 for a new episode. So we haven't even thought about that yet. We've got to get all these Dino Gerties out the door in the next couple days here. So Hal and myself and Brian are going to be busy distributing and doing different things. I think I printed 300 labels tonight, shipping labels, so got a lot to do.
I can hand deliver a few around here. I saw a couple in Ohio,
There you go.
Northeast Ohio, so.
But we appreciate everybody's donation, so if you can, check it out at RetroWDW.com/support us for our store, or go to lbvhistory.org/donate. Appreciate your time and money and helping us keep this show on the air. With that, like I said, we'll be back next month. If you can, give us a shout-out and review on iTunes or wherever your favorite podcasting app is. And with that, Brian's not here, but we'll let him take us out.
Follow the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society on Twitter and Instagram at LBVHistory and on the web at lbvhistory.org. Follow Todd McCartney and RetroWDW on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at RetroWDW. For all things Retro Disney World, including exclusive merchandise, visit us on the web at RetroWDW.com. On Twitter, follow our web designer, Jason Bartel of Deepwater Studios, at JasonDWS. Our announcer, Andre Gardner, at Andre Gardner. And follow our hosts, Hal Bowers, on Twitter and Instagram, at GoAwayGreen, and on the web at kingdomofmemories.com. For JT Kuzier on Twitter, at LS1JT, on YouTube at Rubber City Motoring, and on the web at rubbercitymotoring.com. And you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, at Brian P. Miles. Retro Disney World is the monthly podcast of the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society, a nonprofit, nonpartisan, tax-exempt 501c3 organization, and is not affiliated in any way with the Walt Disney Corporation or any of its subsidiary or affiliated entities.
Leads the way. RCA.